We're already a full month into 2024, and that means it's time to review the Langley real estate market and see what happened in January. And to be honest with you, things have picked up a little bit quicker than I was expecting. Now, when I say that, I did predict that there would be higher levels of competition during this January timeframe. However, we wouldn't see any sort of massive increase in prices. And basically, this is exactly what has happened. However, it's just been at an exaggerated level, especially in comparison to what I had expected. And you'll get a clearer picture this when I start to show you the stats. However, it's not really going to show exactly what's going on at the ground level, so I'll give you some anecdotal evidence as we get towards the end of the video. But let's focus on the numbers first. And with that, I'm going to share my screen with you and just give you a very quick rundown of what's going on in the Fraser Valley real estate market and then how that compares to Langley itself. So starting us off here, signs of stability in the Fraser Valley housing market. The Fraser Valley real estate market showed signs of recovery in January as home sales rose after 6 consecutive months of decline. This is pretty common as we head into December. However, usually there's a little bit of an increase or uptick around September, October prior to that, but just something to keep in mind. And new listings more than double. But again, we see a massive decline, which I'll show you when we get to the other numbers in the Fraser Valley, and then typically start to see it increase up until around May or so before it goes back down a bit. And then, as I mentioned, typically there's a bit of an uptick into September, October before coming back down again. But there were 938 transactions on the MLS in January, which is a 12% increase from December, but below the 10-year average for sales in the region. So in comparison to last year and last year in December, we have seen an increase in the level of activity. However, it hasn't been anything significant. Now, at 2,368 new listings, this was an increase of 151% in January, rebounding strongly from the seasonal lull seen in December. This is the largest month-over-month percentage increase in new listings in 5 years. But once again, we're actually only at about 4,200 listings, just a little bit more on the market right now. We need to see closer to 6 to 6,500 for any sort of more balanced or downward pressure. But moving on, just giving you a quick snapshot of the market. You can see benchmark prices up around 1.466. This is for the Fraser Valley as a whole, which is up almost 9% year over year. Now, this isn't quite the case for some of the individual markets, and we'll see when we get to Langley. The sales to active listings ratio at 19% for the Fraser Valley is in a balanced market, but edging towards a seller's market, which is over 20%. 825,000 for townhomes, up 7%, and 34% for the sales to active listings ratio. So this is a pretty strong seller's market. And then 27% for apartments at just under 540,000. And again, almost up 7% year over year. So what we can see here is that benchmark prices for single family homes in the Fraser Valley decreased 0.4% compared to December, but increased 8.6% compared to January. Townhomes decreased 0.1% compared to December, and then up 6.9% as I already showed you. And apartments increased 0.4% compared to December. Now, the interesting thing here, and something you have to keep in mind, is when we're looking at benchmark prices, it's a lagging indicator. So what we're seeing is typically data from 1 to 2 months ago. Because when we compare that with median prices and average prices, which are going to move more quickly and follow the market more up to date, now they all have their own value and what they're able to showcase. However, again, it's going to take about a month or two for these things to actually show up, but prices are actually slightly up in comparison to December for sure, without a doubt in my mind. Now, moving on, when we look at it from this perspective, again, it's going to show you a very slight decline, but if we look at the median, you can see that prices are up for both apartments and detached, and townhomes looks like they are just slightly down. But then looking at the average, it appears that townhomes are basically flat. The other two are up. However, Langley townhomes seem to hold on to their value a little bit better than a lot of the surrounding cities, and specifically Willoughby. That was a very hot market, continues to be for townhomes. And so it'll be interesting to see how that trend continues, if it does at all, as we continue into this year. Now, next I want to kind of look at the number of sales in Langley overall. So 220, remember there was, I think, 958 or something along those lines. So 220 coming from Langley. So a decent portion of that on an increasing trend from the wintertime in December here. But again, that's generally going to be the case. Last year wasn't, but a lot of times we will see more in January. It doesn't seem to be following that trend the last couple of years, honestly. But December and January are slower times of year without a doubt, but the activity that the buyers are having out there, even though we're not necessarily seeing it in prices yet, is indicating that we're headed for what I would consider an early spring market. Now moving on to new listings. As I mentioned, we trickle down in December. Not a lot of people are listing their properties in December. We start to come up in January, and then it kind of peaks somewhere around May, as you can see, like it did last year. So we're following a similar trend. There was a pretty big increase or influx for Langley itself here, as you can see, 451. Not too bad actually, and more than the prior 2 years, which is interesting, something to keep in mind. Now, the number of active listings on the market, if this will ever load, but this isn't something we necessarily track as closely. We kind of keep an eye on the total market itself, unless there's a certain property type. But for the Fraser Valley itself, we are just over 4,200 listings. And again, we need to be closer to the 6,000, 6,500 range. But we can actually see that we've decreased slightly in the number of listings that are active in Langley, even though we saw that massive influx in comparison to December. So interesting, something to keep in mind for sure. And then I want to take a quick look at the sales to active listings ratio. As I mentioned, between 12 and 20 is balanced. Below 12 is going to be a buyer's market. Above 20 is going to be a seller's market. So we can see that detached homes are in a balanced market. Apartments are in a seller's market, and townhomes are even in a stronger seller's market. So as mentioned, townhomes continue to be the hottest product. So where I'm seeing the most activity realistically is condos under about 650, townhomes under about 900, and then detached homes in the 1.2 to 1.5 range, and specifically those with basement suites. But as we're heading into the second month of the year, into February, I do expect activity to pick up. I do expect things to move a little bit quicker. So at the end of the day, you really have to understand what's going to be best for you. So lastly, before we get to some more anecdotal evidence, we're going to look at detached homes for days on market. So 33, this is the median, 29 days for apartments to sell, and townhomes are at 22. Again, just showing that they are selling quicker. If we were to go to the average, it's going to raise those numbers up a bit. I like median for days on market. I think it makes more sense because of the fact that there's some people that are at completely unrealistic selling prices and don't have any interest to actually sell their property because they're unrealistic, and those could be on the market for 150, 200, 300 days, which kind of skews the data. So that's why median makes more sense to me. But anyways, this should just give you a bit of an idea of if your property is priced correctly, it should sell in less than this time period. If it's not, then it will likely sell in longer. This isn't a perfect science, but maybe if you have a unique property that there's not as big of a buyer pool for, this could change. But in comparison to the other stuff that's on the market, if you do see other stuff that's been selling, you have a pretty standard, let's call it a 3-bed townhome, you should definitely be selling within this time frame. Otherwise, either most likely you're too high priced or you've had poor marketing done. But that's a conversation you'll have to have at that point in time. And so just to add a few things onto the data that we just went over that won't necessarily show up for at least another month or so is the fact that we're starting to see multiple offers show up quite a bit in the market right now. And when I say that, it's not necessarily like 8, 9, 10 offers and over asking price and subject free. A lot of the times it might just be 2, 3, or 4. However, I have already been in multiple situations where I have been in competition in properties with clients that were up at 7 or 8, but for the most part, it's just a few. And a lot of these properties haven't been priced low or had offer dates either. So it's not like it's being artificially induced. Now, the selling price isn't way over the asking price. Again, if it's priced correctly or at least close to what I would consider market value. We are starting to see a little bit of a return in offer dates. So when people will list the property and then set the offer date for a certain date in the future, maybe a week away. However, it hasn't become common practice just quite yet, but I do believe in the next couple weeks time, it probably will start to come back more and more. And so the important thing here is to not get tied up around the listing price of a property, because at the end of the day, it's just a marketing strategy. What you really have to understand is what is the true market value? Because if you approach it from the listing price, you're going to be emotionally involved and attached to that that rather than looking at it objectively. And you just have to kind of forget about it to an extent because it doesn't matter what they put it at. I see people time and time again that want to feel like they got a good deal, and even if a listing is overpriced and maybe they save $25,000 that they're able to negotiate off, it's still over market value. And in comparison, maybe there's a property that's been underpriced and you pay over asking price, but when you look at the actual market value, you've actually knocked value off of it because of the fact that they had chosen a poor listing strategy. So again, this is always going to come down to whatever the unique situation you're in, but make sure you have a trusted professional that's going to be able to guide you through that and show you the data to support what that market value is. And so to summarize, what does this mean for you? Well, if you're looking to upsize or you're a first-time buyer, I think right now and for the maybe next month or potentially two, although I wouldn't be waiting, is probably your best time. And the reason being is that in a down market where prices have compacted and shrunk, there is a lower gap that you have to make the jump to the next property. And then in terms of a first-time buyer, of course, you just want to be able to get in when prices are the lowest. And prior to interest rates coming down, which they will either at some point later in this year or in the near future, buyers are going to start piling back into the market when this starts to happen. So don't wait. Now, if you're making a lateral move or you're a downsizer or something along those lines, you probably do want to wait a few more months here to see what happens, because I do expect prices to be higher and there to be more competition as we get into the spring market and onwards. But again, it's really going to depend on what that move looks like. Where are you going? What kind of property are you going from? What are you selling and what are you buying? Because we have to look at it from a holistic perspective. We can't just be looking at, okay, well, I want to get the maximum sale price possible. And if that's confusing to you and you want to have a further conversation or just talk about potentially buying or selling real estate in Langley, Surrey, or any of the surrounding cities for that matter, or you just want to chat about real estate in general, you can scroll down and click the first link in the description to book a call with me at a time that works best for you. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts. What's going to happen in the Langley real estate market this year? Are we going up? Are we going down? Are we staying where it's at? Let me know down in the comments. And if you did enjoy this video, all I ask is that you hit that thumbs up button so the algorithm will push it out to more amazing people just like yourself who want to learn more about Langley real estate. If you're interested in seeing more videos just like this one, as well as community tours across the Lower Mainland, I suggest you consider subscribing to our channel. And before you get out of here, make sure you check out another video on our channel, and we'll see you in the next one.